Everyone says there's a moment when things change, when something happens and you can't unsee it, can't undo it. For me, it wasn't loud or dramatic, no shouting. It was quieter than that, and somehow that made it worse. The strange thing is, Thomas and I never talked about what happened. Not that night, not the morning after, not even in the weeks that followed. We just agreed, without saying a word, to pretend it never did. Meanwhile, everyone else seemed to get the memo we refused to write. It started on a Thursday. I remember that because Thursdays were our routine nights: takeout, cheap beer, whatever series we were half watching but mostly ignoring. We'd been roommates for almost 2 years by then, long enough that our lives were tangled in small, boring ways. Shared grocery lists, inside jokes, an unspoken agreement that I always did the dishes and he always took out the trash. From the outside, we looked exactly like what we were supposed to be. Two straight-passing guys in our late 20s, working too much, complaining about rent, drifting through life together because it was easier than doing it alone. Except, I wasn't straight. And Thomas was complicated. That night had started like any other. He came home late, tie already loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking exhausted in that way that somehow made him even more attractive. I was on the couch, laptop balanced on my knees, pretending to work. "You eat yet?" he asked, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. "Nope," I said. "I was waiting for you. Domestic bliss and all that." He snorted, that familiar half-laugh that always made me feel weirdly proud. Like I'd earned it. "Chinese. Obviously." We ate straight from the containers. That wasn't new. We'd always been like that, too close, too comfortable. I trained myself not to think about it. About him. At some point, the conversation drifted. Work gossip. His boss being an idiot. My failed attempt at dating apps. He didn't tease me about being gay anymore, not because he ever did it cruelly, but because at some point it had stopped being a thing between us. Then the power went out. Total blackout. TV dead. Apartment suddenly quiet except for the hum of the city outside. "Seriously?" Thomas groaned. "Of course this happens now." I laughed and reached for my phone flashlight. "Romantic timing." He shot me a look. "Don't make it weird." The silence stretched. "I'll check the fuse box," he said, standing up. "Want help?" He hesitated. Just for a second. "Yeah, sure." The hallway was narrow, barely enough space for 2 people. Neither of us said anything. If I'm being honest, I don't know who leaned in first. Maybe we both did. Maybe neither of us did. But suddenly his forehead was resting against mine. "Joseph," he said quietly. Not a warning. Not a question. Just my name. That was all it took. I won't get into details. Not because they weren't intense, they were, but because what mattered more was how it felt afterward. The way we stood there in the dark, like if we stayed still enough the world wouldn't notice. Eventually, the power came back on. Lights flickered. Reality snapped into place. Thomas stepped back like he'd been burned. "Okay," he said too quickly. "Fuse is fine. Must have been the building." "Yeah," I replied, my voice not quite steady. "Probably." And just like that, it was over. We went back to the couch, turned the TV back on, finished our food, talked about nothing. The next morning, he made coffee like usual. I grabbed my mug like usual. We said goodbye like usual. But here's the thing, people started looking at us differently. At the grocery store, the cashier smiled a little too knowingly. At work, our mutual friends asked how we were doing. Someone at a party joked, "You two are basically married already." Thomas would laugh it off. I would too, because that was the deal. We were pretending nothing had happened, even though everyone else already knew something had. And the worst part? So did we. After that night, the apartment felt different in ways I couldn't explain without sounding insane. Nothing had changed, at least not on the surface. Thomas still left his shoes by the door like a psychopath. I still complained and moved them anyway. We still ate together, still watched TV, still existed in the same small orbit. But underneath it all, there was this low, constant awareness. Like a hum you stop noticing until the moment it cuts out. We were hyper-aware of each other. I noticed how often he looked at me and then looked away. How his jokes landed softer now, and I hated how much I noticed. One Saturday morning, we ran into our neighbors in the stairwell. A straight couple, loud, always fighting, always making up. The guy grinned at us and said, "You two still living the dream together?" Thomas smiled easily. "Someone's gotta do it." The girl laughed. "Honestly, I thought you guys were together when we first moved in." I felt it immediately, the tension beside me. Thomas didn't react fast enough. Just a half-second too slow. "Oh yeah," he said finally. "Why's that?" She shrugged. "I don't know. You just act like it." There it was. Again. I held my breath, waiting for him to laugh it off harder than necessary, like he usually did. Instead, he just nodded. "Huh," he said. "Weird." We walked the rest of the way down in silence. Inside the apartment, he dropped his keys on the counter harder than needed. "People are so annoying," he muttered. "Yeah," I said. "They read into stuff that isn't there." The lie sat between us, heavy and obvious. That became our pattern. Someone would imply something. We'd deny it without really denying it. Then we'd both pretend it hadn't happened. At night, I lay in bed listening to him move around in his room. The floor creaking, the low murmur of his voice when he took late calls. I wondered if he ever replayed that moment in the hallway the way I did. If he remembered the way he'd said my name like it meant something else. I didn't bring it up because I was terrified of what the answer might be. A few weeks later, we went to a friend's birthday. Crowded bar, loud music, cheap shots. Thomas stuck close to me the entire night, which wasn't unusual, but this time it felt intentional. Protective, almost. At one point, a guy started flirting with me. Harmless, casual. Thomas noticed immediately. "He with you?" the guy asked, nodding toward Thomas. "No," I said. "Just my roommate." Thomas raised his eyebrows but didn't correct him. Later, while I was ordering drinks, Thomas leaned in close, mouth near my ear so I could hear him over the music. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." "Why?" He shrugged. "Just checking." On the walk home, the city felt quieter than usual. Thomas shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, shoulders tense. "You ever think about moving out?" he asked suddenly. The question hit me harder than it should have. "What? No. Why?" "I don't know," he said. "Just thinking ahead." "To what?" He stopped walking. I stopped too. For a moment, I thought he was finally going to say it. Whatever it was. But instead, he shook his head and started walking again. "Never mind," he said. "Forget it." That night, I lay awake longer than usual. Because pretending nothing had happened was one thing. But pretending nothing was still happening? That was getting harder by the day. And the worst part was knowing that eventually, one of us was going to break first. The breaking point didn't come in some dramatic explosion. It came in the form of a completely ordinary Tuesday. I'd had a long day at work, the kind where everything felt slightly off but nothing was technically wrong. When I got home, Thomas was already there, standing at the stove, stirring something that smelled way better than anything we usually made. "You cooking now?" I asked, dropping my bag. He shrugged without turning around. "Thought I'd try being an adult." I smiled despite myself. "Who are you and what have you done with my roommate?" He laughed, but it sounded tight, forced. He asked about my day. I asked about his. We did that thing we'd perfected, talking just enough to avoid saying anything real. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and set it face down on the counter. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just my sister." I nodded, but something in his tone made my stomach twist. He'd always been close with her. She was also the first person to ever ask flat out if he had feelings for me. After dinner, we ended up on the couch again. Same spots, same distance. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. "Joseph," he said suddenly. I looked over. "Yeah." He hesitated, jaw tightening like he was bracing himself. "Can I ask you something?" My heart kicked up. "Okay. Do you ever feel like..." He stopped, rubbed his hands together. "Like people already decided something about you, and you're just too late to change it?" I swallowed. "All the time." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the TV. "They keep asking if I'm seeing someone. At work, my family, even random people. And I don't know what to tell them anymore." The room felt smaller. Hotter. You could tell them the truth, I said quietly. He finally looked at me then. Really looked at me. And what is the truth? He asked. There it was. The question we'd been circling for weeks. I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because the honest answer was terrifying. I don't know, I admitted. But pretending nothing happened isn't working. His breath hitched just barely. I think about it, he said. That night. All the time. I didn't look away. Me too. Silence stretched between us, heavy but not empty. I didn't freak out because of you, he continued. I freaked out because I didn't hate it, and that scared the hell out of me. Something inside my chest cracked open. I would have been okay if you said it was a mistake, I said. But this half thing we're doing? It's messing with my head. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands gripping each other. I don't know what I am, he said, or what this makes me. I'm not asking you to label anything, I replied. I'm asking you to stop acting like it didn't happen. He stood up suddenly, pacing the length of the living room, ran a hand through his hair, stopped in front of me. Everyone already thinks we're together, he said. They look at us like it's obvious. Is that really the problem? I asked. Or is the problem that it might be? His jaw clenched. For a long second, I thought he was going to shut down again. Walk away. Retreat. Instead, he exhaled slowly and sat back down closer. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. The words hit harder than any confession. You won't, I said. But we can't keep lying. Not to everyone else. And not to ourselves. His hand hovered between us, uncertain. Then, finally, he let it rest over mine. Outside, a car passed. Someone laughed on the street below. Life went on like nothing was changing. But sitting there, hand in hand, we both knew something had. And pretending otherwise wasn't an option anymore. Nothing changed overnight. And somehow that was the most honest part of all of it. I didn't suddenly wake up brave. We didn't label anything, didn't make promises, didn't even move our hands for a long time. We just sat there, fingers loosely intertwined, like we were testing whether the ground would give out beneath us. Eventually, he pulled his hand back, not abruptly, not like before, just carefully. I need time, he said. Not to run, just to catch up with myself. I can do time, I replied. I just can't do pretending. He nodded. Fair. That became our new unspoken agreement. No more lies, no more rewriting reality, but also no rushing ahead of what either of us could handle. The shift was subtle, but other people noticed immediately. At brunch with friends that weekend, someone joked, "You guys got quieter. Should we be worried?" Thomas smiled, softer than usual. Nah, just thinking more. Our friend raised an eyebrow, amused. Aha! I caught Thomas glancing at me across the table, like he was checking whether I was okay. I was nervous, sure, but lighter than I'd been in weeks. At home, the tension didn't disappear. It changed shape. We talked more. Real conversations this time. About his childhood. About my last serious relationship. About how lonely it can feel to live a life everyone assumes they already understand. One night, we stayed up too late, sitting on the kitchen floor with beers between us. You know what messes with me the most? He said. That it didn't feel like a discovery. It felt like remembering something I'd forgotten. I leaned my head back against the cabinet. Yeah, that. He laughed quietly. You ever feel like we've been circling this for years? I try not to think about it, I admitted. But, yeah, till the night his sister came to visit. She took one look at us in the living room, him on one end of the couch, me on the other, bodies angled toward each other like magnets, and smirked. So, she said, how long have you two been lying to yourselves? Thomas groaned. Can you not? She rolled her eyes. Relax. I'm happy for you. Whatever this is. After she went to bed, the apartment felt impossibly quiet. She always sees too much, Thomas muttered. I smiled. She's not wrong. He didn't argue. Instead, he sat beside me. I'm scared, he said, but not in the way I thought I'd be. I turned to face him. What way then? That if we don't do something about this, I'll regret it more than if we do. My heart pounded, steady and loud. "Thomas," I said. "I'm right here. I've been right here." He looked at me for a long second. Then he leaned in, not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate, and pressed his forehead to mine, the same way he had in the dark hallway weeks ago. "Okay," he said quietly. I smiled. "Okay. Yeah. Just okay." He exhaled, a shaky laugh slipping out. "That felt like something I don't want to pretend didn't happen." "Good," I said, "because I'm out of pretending." We sat there for a while afterward, shoulders touching, the TV still playing something neither of us had followed for the past 20 minutes. His knee bounced nervously, and at one point I reached down and stilled it with my hand. He didn't pull away. The next morning felt strange in a different way. Not awkward, more like waking up in a place you know well, but seeing it in a new light. Thomas was already in the kitchen when I came out, hair messy, wearing one of those old t-shirts he refused to throw away. "Morning," he said, watching me a little too closely. "Morning," I replied. We smiled at the same time, then both laughed because it was ridiculous how charged a simple greeting suddenly felt. Nothing else happened. No dramatic declarations. No second kiss. Just coffee, toast, and a mutual awareness humming under everything. But the world did not miss the shift. When we walked into work events together, people paused. When Thomas talked about his weekend, coworkers looked between us like they were waiting for a punchline. My friends stopped asking if I was seeing anyone and started asking, "So, how's Thomas?" One night, someone straight up said it. "You know, a friend told me over drinks. You two stopped trying to convince us you're not together." That's how we knew. I went home and told Thomas. He groaned, dragging a hand down his face. "I knew it. Everyone already thought it," I said. "We just finally stopped correcting them." He leaned against the counter, thoughtful. "Does that bother you?" I shook my head. "Not really. Does it bother you?" He took a second before answering. "Less than I thought it would." That was the thing with Thomas. Every honest moment loosened something in him. Not all at once. Just enough to breathe easier. We didn't tell people explicitly. We didn't announce anything. We just let it be. Let people assume. He rested his head against my shoulder this time without hesitation. "You ever think about how obvious this was?" he murmured. "All the time," I said. "I think everyone else was just waiting for us to catch up." He smiled into my shoulder. "I'm glad we did." "Me too." Because pretending nothing happened had been exhausting. And letting it happen slowly, honestly felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. The first time Thomas reached for my hand in public, it wasn't brave or dramatic. It happened in a grocery store. We were arguing quietly about pasta shapes. I was firmly in the penne is overrated camp. He was wrong and defending fusilli like it was a personal value. At some point, without looking at me, he hooked his pinky around mine. Just like that. No announcement. No eye contact. Just a small, grounding gesture like he needed to make sure I was still there. I froze for half a second, then laced my fingers through his. Neither of us let go. No one clapped. No one stared. The world kept moving, carts rattling, someone's kid crying 3 aisles over. And somehow that made it feel more real than anything else. Afterward, back in the car, he exhaled and laughed softly. "Okay, that was a thing. You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." From then on, the pretending didn't stop all at once, it just stopped being necessary. We still didn't use labels. Still didn't post anything. But Thomas stopped correcting people when they assumed. He stopped flinching when someone called me his partner instead of his roommate. And I stopped waiting for the moment he'd pull away. One night, lying on opposite ends of the couch, he spoke into the dark. "You know what I used to think?" he said. "What?" "That if I ever crossed that line, everything would change. I'd lose control, lose myself." "And?" I asked. He rolled onto his side, facing me. "Turns out I just feel more like myself, which is annoying." I smiled. "Welcome to the club." Not everything was easy. There were awkward conversations, long pauses, moments where old habits crept back in and he'd retreat for a day or two, needing space. I gave it to him not because I was afraid, but because I trusted him now. And he always came back. The real test came when someone finally asked him outright. We were at a small get-together, half drunk, sitting too close like usual. Someone gestured between us and said, half joking, half serious, "So, are you guys together or what?" The room went quiet. I didn't look at Thomas. I didn't want to corner him. I just waited. He took a breath. "Yeah," he said. Simple. Clear. No apology in it. "We are." My chest tightened not with fear, but with something like relief. Later that night, back home, he leaned against the door after we came in, eyes closed. "That felt big," he admitted. I stepped closer. "You did good." He opened his eyes and smiled at me. Not nervous. Not unsure. Just honest. "Thanks for not pushing," he said. "And for not walking away." I shrugged lightly. We both took our time. Once the words were out there, "Yeah, we are," something settled between us. Not excitement exactly. Not nerves either. It was steadier than that. Like finally standing on solid ground after months of balancing on something half-built. People adjusted faster than I expected. Our friends didn't make a big deal out of it, which felt like the biggest kindness. A couple of raised eyebrows. A few knowing smiles. One very enthusiastic. About time. And then life just kept going. At home, though, things shifted in ways that felt more intimate than public hand-holding ever could. Thomas started leaving his door open. Not as a statement, just casually, like he'd forgotten there was ever a reason to close it. We fell into a rhythm of ending our days together, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the same quiet space. One night, while brushing our teeth side by side, he caught my eye in the mirror and smiled. "This still feels weird," he said. "Good weird or bad weird?" He rinsed, wiped his mouth. "Good. Just unfamiliar." I leaned against the counter. "We don't have to rush into anything." "I know," he said. Then softer. "But I don't want to keep you in limbo either." That mattered more than he probably realized. A few days later, his sister texted me directly for the first time. "So, he finally got brave." "Huh? Take care of him. He's terrible at talking when he's scared." I stared at the message longer than necessary before replying. "I know. I am." Thomas watched me type, pretending not to read over my shoulder. "She like you?" he asked casually. "She already did," I said. "Now she's just relieved." He laughed, shaking his head. Figures. The truth was, Thomas was still figuring things out. What it meant, what it didn't. There were nights he'd go quiet, thoughtful, distant, not pulling away, just processing. And instead of panicking like I used to, I let him have that space. Because he always came back clearer. One evening, we took a walk after dinner, the city warm and slow around us. He slipped his hand into mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I used to think love was supposed to hit you like a truck," he said. "Big, obvious, impossible to ignore. And now?" I asked. "And now I think it's this," he said, lifting our joined hands slightly. Quiet, persistent, hard to shake. I squeezed his fingers. "Yeah, that." We stopped at a crosswalk, surrounded by strangers who didn't know us and didn't care. The light turned red. He looked at me, really looked at me. "You know everyone saw it before we did, right?" he said. I smiled. "They always do." He leaned in and kissed me there, unbothered by who might notice. Not long, not dramatic, just real. And in that moment, I realized something. We hadn't been pretending because we were afraid of what people would think. We'd been pretending because we weren't ready to admit how much it already mattered. But now there was nothing left to hide. The funny thing about pretending is that you don't realize how tired you are until you stop. Months passed, quietly. No milestones you'd post about. No anniversaries circled on a calendar. Just mornings where Thomas made coffee without asking how I took it. Evenings where I'd automatically reach for his jacket when he forgot it. Nights where we fell asleep tangled together like that's how it had always been. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, really watching me, with this calm, settled expression that still caught me off guard. "What?" I'd ask. He'd shake his head, smiling. "Nothing. Just didn't think I'd get this." "Get what?" "This," he'd say, gesturing vaguely between us, and not have it feel like a compromise. That was Thomas in a sentence. Honest, but only once he was sure. One evening, long after all the drama had burned itself out, we were back in the hallway where it had started. The fuse box had been replaced. The lighting was brighter now, less forgiving. "I hate this hallway," he said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. "Trauma?" He chuckled, then grew serious. "No. I just keep thinking about how close I came to walking away from you that night." "You didn't," I said. He nodded. "I know. But I almost did." He stepped closer, resting his forehead against mine, just like before. Only this time there was no fear in it. "Thank you for staying," he said quietly. I swallowed. "Thank you for coming back." Outside, the city kept doing what it always does. People passed us every day who had no idea we'd once built a whole lie just to survive our own feelings. Friends still joked about how obvious we were from the beginning, and they weren't wrong. We had pretended nothing happened while everyone else already knew. But the truth is something had happened. Slowly, relentlessly, in 100 tiny moments that refused to be ignored. And in the end, the only people fooled by our act were the two of us. Now, standing there with Thomas, arms around each other, no pretending left to do, it finally felt simple. Not easy, not perfect, just real. And that was more than enough.